State, under the leadership of the delegation, then in many ways led by Tom Davis, Republican member of Congress at that point, where Congress stepped up for a 10-year commitment, $150 million a year. That commitment is running out this year. So we are introducing legislation that will reestablish for the next 10 years a $150 million commitment to Metro. And in addition to that, we will add a $50 million additional funding stream if Metro makes certain conditions around safety and accountability. I think this legislation is incredibly important. I think we all know as local representatives that Metro is really the federal government and our nation's capital's key transportation system. Without Metro, the gridlock that we would exist, or the ability to get to this hill, would be greatly diminished, and we think it's time for our federal partners to step up. This is made all the more important because we've asked for some period of time that our state partners step up, and we're proud of the fact that Maryland, Virginia, and the district have stepped up with a $500 million in additional funding each year. It's time for the federal government to not only continue its long-term 10-year commitment, but step up as well with additional funding. Metro did a recent assessment that they're $25 billion in deferred maintenance. Those of us on the Virginia side, Tim and I worked very, very hard for a number of years to make sure we can get Metro to Dulles and beyond. Well, we get that done, and then we have a bottleneck in terms of another crossing at Roslyn, and that unfunded liability of another $1 billion, then the benefit of Metro to Dulles and beyond will be greatly diminished. So this is a team effort. I'm proud of our joint state delegations. We're going to get this done. Chris and I serve on the banking committee, and where we've had ongoing conversations with Chairman Crapo, and we are very optimistic our effort combined with the effort in the House, and we will see the federal government truly step up and be the partner that our local jurisdictions, and more importantly, the federal workers and all the constituents of all three jurisdictions and the visitors need and enjoy. With that, let me turn it over to, actually, the senior member of the dual delegation, and I was going to say the only guy that still had a jacket on, but Senator Ben Garden.
No, Senator Kaine and I believe senators should be wearing jackets, that's all.
You think my spritzing
to Senator Warner, thank you for outlining so well and your real commitment to take the legislative action on funding for Metro to the next level. Your leadership of Senator Van Hollen, Senator Kaine, the four of us have worked together to make sure that we are united. So let me just go back 12 years ago when we filed the first funding bill. It was filed in May of 2017. It took a little over a year for us to get it enacted and into law. And it was a commitment. I took the lead on it, but I had the help of Senator Warner. He had a different first name, John Warner, Senator Webb, and Senator Mikulski. And at that time, we wanted to make sure we had a predictable funding source from the federal government for a 10-year period, $1.5 billion, which was not an easy achievement. But we achieved that, enacted, as Senator Warner pointed out, in 2008. That is funding, $150 million a year, has been there every single year. So we have the predictable federal funding source. It's now necessary to take it to the next level. Over the last decade, we have seen the challenges of the Metro system. We have seen an aged system that has incredible ridership. This is the nation's Metro system. At peak hours, 40% of the ridership are federal workers. This is the nation's capital. The Metro system is critically important to our country. So the federal government needs to take a responsible partnership in dealing with the current problems. The problems are aged systems, we had safety issues, and we can do better. So yes, the first order of business is to reauthorize a 10-year commitment to make sure that $1.5 billion is there for the next decade. But we need to take it to the next level with an additional $50 million a year. And that's what we're supporting based upon certain reforms taking place. We do applaud the work of the IG. Mr. Charrington's doing a great job. He needs more help, and this bill will give him more help. Paul Wiedefeld's doing a great job under difficult circumstances. We want to give him additional tools in order to be able to deal with the safety issues. And we have many reforms here on dealing with safety. The bottom line is the extra $50 million will be made available based upon the reforms taking place. We think that's a responsible way for Congress to act and to increase the federal government's commitment to the metro system during this next decade. We're united, we're together, and we think this is critically important to our country. With that, I'll turn it over to my colleague, Senator Kaine.
Well, listen, I appreciate the opportunity to stand with a group of colleagues who, together with our House delegations, are also unified around this important mission. This region, the nation's capital region, has got a lot of momentum right now. There's a lot of very positive things happening. In Virginia, we're thrilled about the Amazon announcement. I could give you 10 others in Maryland, D.C., and Virginia that are really powering the region forward, but this region does not work without Metro. It would come to a complete standstill. The federal government would come to a standstill. Metro users are in every congressional office and every Senate office on the Hill, in every federal agency. Metro and the success of the D.C. region are completely linked, and that's why this is so important. I just want to acknowledge what was said about Paul. Paul has come in at a very challenging time, and there have been significant challenges. The death of a Virginian in 2015 on Metro, what a horrible tragedy. The need to do significant safety improvements while the system is still running, and trying to do it in a way where people get advance notice about what's going to be happening so that they can make their plans. This is a very complex task, but the CEO, Paul Wiedefeld, has done a good job. The IG has done a good job. And I think our ATU members, the 13,000 plus Metro employees who are members of the ATU, we're not always all together on every issue. On this bill, we are all together. Everybody is together. Once the local jurisdictions and states kicked in their money, now it's our turn to do our job. And only in the Senate would public transit be in the banking committee, but I'm glad we got two members of the banking committee standing here with us. And with that, let me introduce my friend and colleague from Maryland, Chris Van Hollen.
Thank you, Tim. Thank you. Well, I want to thank my colleagues. This effort has been in the works for a while. We've been reaching out to all the stakeholders to try to finalize the legislation, and we're happy to introduce that today. A healthy metro system is vital to the success of this region. And as my colleagues have said, it's also vital to the success of the federal government, which is why it is the nation's metro system, and it's why it's the only metro system in the country that receives the special allocation. But our colleagues understand that it's vital to the federal government. And as Senator Cardin said, 40% of peak morning hour riders are coming to the federal government. Capital South Metro here, Pentagon in Virginia, NIH, Walter Reed in Maryland, just as a couple of examples. So it's vital to the lifeblood of this area. And we need the continuity. I was pleased to be part of a team in the House 10 years ago, working with Tom Davis from Virginia, Steny Hoyer, and Eleanor Holmes Norton to pass that in the House. And then, of course, you heard folks did it here in the Senate. That 10 years expires this year. And so we want to make sure we have that continuity so that Paul and his team and the Inspector General's office and their team can continue to do their good work. I want to stress that in addition to the innovations that are required in order to achieve the other $50 million on top of the $150 million, which were the safety reforms and greater independence for the IG, that in order to access all of these funds, we need to make sure that we have top-notch cybersecurity, and we've been very clear that as part of that effort, we should not be purchasing the rail cars for the Washington Metro system from China in order to assure the security of communications in this region, and that's another very important feature here. Let me just close by, again, thanking all the parties we reached out to, including the Office of the Mayor of Washington, D.C., Mayor Bowser. ATU has been mentioned, and the Metro Now Coalition, which includes the Federal City Council, the Greater Washington Board of Trade, the Greater Washington Partnership, the 2030 Group, the Coalition for Smarter Growth, the Northern Virginia Chamber of Commerce, and a number of other stakeholders have all been part of this conversation that brings us here today. So let's keep working. We had some good news in the House today, in the last 48 hours, which is the House Appropriations Subcommittee did go forward with $150 million. In the Senate Appropriations Committee, we're hoping to do that, but we want to build on that, and we need to make sure it's secure, and the only way we're going to make sure this is secure going forward is to pass the legislation. So thank all of you who've been part of it, and I will
Questions, comments?
This funding situation and the crisis that we're in right now, if you look at Virginia, which is about to undergo for the next 3 months, this is 5 decades in the making of funding issues. And throughout that time, we have had members of Congress from outside of this area complain that they are not all the time in support of this region's mass transit system. Is that changing now because of what you talked about what their staff faces? Is the message getting across that you can't have stations crumbling and rotting in the nation's capital?
I think in many ways, whether we think about Metro, whether we think about some of our airports, frankly, it's not only raises safety issues, but just who we are as a nation. When you see metro systems around the rest of the world, or airports around the rest of the world, be 21st centuries, and ours in so many ways aging. In many ways, we, because we were the last major metro system built, and it went for decades with probably not the kind of recommitment to maintenance. But I think the vast majority of our Republican colleagues get the fact that their workforce depends on Metro, that this is how we show ourselves to the rest of the country and the rest of the world. This is the most powerful city in the whole wide world, and do we want to have a system that is crumbling? So I am optimistic. Chris and I have spent time talking to our colleagues on the banking committee. We're going to do more of that. I think we'll get this done. I think we'll get it done in a way that not only gets that 150, but gets that additional 50 as well.
I just point out we have a lot of people helping us with members of Congress, their staffs. They use the Metro. They know how valuable it is. I think the worth of this system is incredibly important, and members of Congress and their staff recognize that, and they recognize this is an old system, and that maintenance is always something that you have to be concerned about because it's not as visible as a lot of other aspects of infrastructure, and maintenance was neglected. So I think they understand it. I think they get that. Obviously, these are tough budget times, but I'm confident we'll have the support. The bill enacted in 2008, every year the funding has been given by Congress. We've always been able to get the money.
How important is the provision related to China and not allowing a state-sponsored company in China to sell rail cars? And what kind of response have you got from Metro itself related to that?
This is I think Metro understands. The challenge is the cars made in China are cheaper. But that's the same challenge we face as we move into the world of 5G, the next generation of telecommunications, where you've got an equipment provider like Huawei that provides cheaper equipment. One of the things I've been working on as a member of the Intelligence Committee is the intelligence committees, or the intelligence community, all of the agencies that are around this region, are unanimous in the threat that China poses with its technology. And part of our job is, part of what I've been working on, is how we get that message out in a non-classified way. And it would be a huge mistake. And this is, I think, metro systems around the country, and for that matter around the world, are starting to recognize that there may be a reason that some of these cars are coming in cheaper, because they may come with some technology vulnerabilities that we would not want to have in our nation's capital.
May I ask something related to intelligence? May I?
Are you a reporter?
No.
Let's take questions for press, and then we can stay and visit. Yeah.
Following up on the China question, the bids are due by the end of this month, but this legislation won't be enacted into law, for weeks or months. So Metro will be in a position where they're required by their own rules to award the contract to, the legally defined best bidder, and unless there's federal legislation of some sort intervening in the meantime, they're not going to have any reason not to give it to the cheapest bidder. So what would you say to Metro in that circumstance?
Let me just underscore the point that Senator Warner said. This is a matter of national security. I think Metro understands the concern of Congress. This is not just 4 senators feeling this way. This has been pretty well documented by information we have received. So we will work with Metro to make sure that the Chinese technology does not get into the new equipment that is needed by Metro. We'll figure out a way to comply with law to make sure our national security is protected.
Yeah, let me just emphasize, let me emphasize something on that, because when Metro reviews all the bids, they're obviously going to have to take into account lots of factors. And they're clearly aware of the discussion that's going on, not just in Congress, but in the national security community. And in my judgment, they have the authority to take that into account in making their decisions. We also wrote this into this bill very intentionally. The 150 million and the 50 million are all contingent on China not having rail cars that could compromise our national security here, those rail cars we're talking about. That certainly can be part of Metro's consideration, because they rely on that $150 million a year from the federal government. So if in their deliberations they say, well, when this passes, we're going to lose 150 million, in my judgment, that's a very reasonable factor for them to take into account.
This is Senator Crapo's bill also.
Do you believe that there's a way that they could buy from the Chinese state-owned company but still have it be safe? In other words, do you think that it's possible to basically scrub those cars so that there's not a cybersecurity issue, or basically is it no way can we buy from them?
My personal view is no, there's no way we can buy from them.
And I think that it's the same thing with the 5G debate over Huawei. If you talk to our national security agencies, it's their judgment that once that infrastructure is in place, the government of China would be able to effectively commandeer that infrastructure and communications in the case of 5G, and so that it's a risk we should not take.
Yes. Do we remember when we allowed Russia to build our embassy in Moscow? Let's learn a lesson from what we did in the past.
Please.
So what's wrong with Metro's capital planning process that you want there?
Well, look, the reforms have been suggested by a number of panels that have been in panel. The LaHood panel made a number of recommendations about oversight, the role of alternates on the board. You know, my view of the Metro challenges have been fundamentally that they're challenges at the management level, and that management needed to get better, and that's why I'm a supporter of Paul Wiedefeld. I think they've done a good job, but a number of these reforms have come straight out of commissions that were chartered to give us advice about improvements to safety and improvements to board structure and oversight. And I think when we can make those changes apparent to the members, that is what will give us the ability to not just get what we've gotten for the last 10 years, but increase the investment by $50 million a year.
One more question. Following up on Robert's question, if Metro does decide to buy these Chinese rail cars before this bill is enacted, will the bill be taken off the table, or will it apply retroactively?
I don't think we'll get to that point. Yeah.
Thank you.
All right. Thank you.
Yeah,